stream on YouTube. All right, and we're live. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Octant community meeting on May 12th, 2021. This is the Octant 20 edition. We've got a release yesterday, and now we are currently going to talk a little bit about what's next, what's going on in Octant 2.0. Let me fix that typo. And we are going to, I think we've got 3 things on the agenda today. We're just going to go through some of the work on the Octant 2.1 board. We can talk a little bit about improving the workflow. I'm not sure, Milan, did you add this one?
Yes.
Okay, cool. We'll talk about some process related things and we'll take notes. And then we could also talk about a PR that Vikram is working on. I don't know if he's on the call, but this one is going to be about the addition of standard alerts. And this is a cool pattern that will be introduced pretty soon. So let's get started. We'll make this a little bigger. Cool. So we can talk about the Octant 2.1 board pretty briefly here. So the next release that's coming up is going to be focused towards 2 things. I think the first one being a bunch of resource viewer improvements. This is going to be a work in progress that's spanning multiple releases and spearheaded by Milan, and we're going to continue doing that. I think we've had a lot of good ideas coming out, and we want to talk about a little bit more about how to visualize the data properly, and then we can start talking about how to perhaps arrange things in a way that makes more sense to a user, and eventually even start exposing different actions. And so these are just broken up to a variety of different issues, and I think this one that's being added, resource data plan, yeah. So we are essentially just going to talk about going to continue fixing the different views related to the resource viewer as needed. Did I miss anything about the resource viewer part?
No, I think you mentioned everything. This one you're highlighting, I just actually submitted PR this morning, so excited that we are moving forward with this, and it's all about adding more context, adding user more ability to zoom in and out, and collapse, expand nodes, do things like that, expanding the amount of details we show in details pane and things like that. So it's pretty exciting. It's kind of that gradual road we outlined a little while ago, how to incrementally improve the resource viewer. So should be interesting.
Cool. Yeah, thank you. The other big one, and this one I mentioned privately within our team, but I can also talk about in the community meeting, is this particular issue is getting blank contents in overview page for a cluster with restricted RBAC. And this one has been around for a while, but I think we need to address this fairly soon. And by soon, I think this needs to be an Octant 2.1, simply because this is used in a lot of VMware's internal, self-guided labs, I think that's what they're called. And they are trying to use Octant for some of these self-guided labs. And so for people who are watching this, if you are doing any of the VMware Tanzu labs that are Octant related, you might notice that it's not using the latest Octant, and it's simply because of this particular issue, where at some point when we updated our implementation of the Dash client and the object cache, what ended up happening was that if you do not have access to CRDs, the entire watcher would fail, and then Octant would just not show anything. And so we want to do better than that, and definitely have this fixed up so that we can have our labs use the latest version of Octant. And we've got a couple more interesting ones. I think this one, also done by Milan, is the file uploader. This is a super interesting component, simply because we see a couple of places where it could already be relevant, like the apply YAML page, the kubeconfig page. And historically, this is difficult to do because if we just run Octant as an Angular application, it doesn't really have access to any of the file system libraries. So we can start experimenting with Electron as well, and we can even do things like reading, essentially not even sending a file over the wire, but when we're uploading, it really is just, I want a file and I'm sending it locally back to Octant itself. So it seems kind of strange initially when thinking about it on how the flow of the file actually works. But I think overall, this isn't. This is something that we definitely could use in a ton of places, and we're going to. Yeah, I think Milan already has this, so it's under review right now, and so keep an eye out for this as we keep going. And finally, the last piece that we're working on is a bunch of the form refactors. We've got stuff like horizontal stacking of fields, and I think we've got the stepper on here. So we're going to create a bunch of new work regarding how to change the forms, as in particular the forms as in their layouts for each field. And we also want to start thinking about dynamic forms, so that each step of a stepper can influence the content of the next step, and being able to go through and create forms dynamically rather than right now where they just kind of have to be entirely static. So that's ODA 2.1 in a nutshell. We have some other things on here that's on to do. I think what ended up happening, because since ODA 20 came out as a slower release, we could still definitely try to aim the target release date, probably at the end of May. So certainly this one might be a shorter release just because of how the cycle works out, but I think it's okay. We can adjust our workloads accordingly, and anything that needs to be pushed, we can just do another dot release. Any questions about ODA 2.1 or even the release that came out yesterday? Oh, all right, cool. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, I just wanted to say, kind of, invite the community to participate in this too. So if there's anybody watching this, if there's anything you would like to see in 0.21 that's not there, please raise your voice. The best thing to do that is to the GitHub issues. We monitor those all the time. So if there are any issues that you feel it should be there, please let us know. We'll definitely listen.
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks for bringing it up. That is very true. I think at the core of what Octant is supposed to be, essentially our work is guided by community decisions. So if you're working on anything, even at core Octant plugins, just ping us and we will definitely take a look. Cool. All right, next item, improving the workflow. Would you like to talk about that a little bit, Milan?
Sure, I can kind of set the stage. We briefly discussed this yesterday on LL, but I thought we should probably try to, discuss this further in this environment. Basically, we were wondering what can we do to kind of improve the workflow to make us a little more efficient. And ultimately, the conclusion yesterday was, if at least the hope is that if we can make some really small tweaks in the way we work, that will make us be a little more productive, improve the team velocity, and ultimately help us release faster. So I just wanted to, open up for discussion. What do you all feel are some things we can do in order to, make things move a little faster and make it turn around? And, when you finish a feature, moment from when you finish the feature until it actually ends up in a build and it actually hits the actual end users, make a little shorter.
Yeah, I have some thoughts around this. So there are a few things that come up when we get to the point where someone is pushing code. I think the first piece here is time to review. And certainly we've had, I think for the last release, it's kind of an anomaly because we have some engineers who are in Colombia and they've got like political things going on. And then we've also got COVID related outages. So like people are in and out. But I think one of the things that ended up becoming what's going on here? Start freezing. Okay. Yeah. One of the things that we can potentially start looking into is the concept of owners, right? So for example, here, let's give an example, right? We have, say, your select file component, right? This was opened 5 days ago, right? And it's not clear out of the moment how many people have taken an initial pass or how many people have ran that code. And I think part of this is my fault. I definitely should have a quicker turnaround to some of these reviews as well. But I think we don't have the concept of code owners. So sometimes there isn't really any encouragement to take a look at other people's work unless it's directly relevant to what the engineer is working on in that particular moment. And so we can implement this like a fair number of ways, but I think like I would eventually like to get to the state where at least two different people are looking at a newer bit of push code. And I think we implemented a policy saying like, oh, we wanted to have a quick turnaround. We wanted to come back to people with comments within like, I think 48 or 72 hours. And we really want to uphold that. I certainly think we have enough people to do that. Another piece that comes up to me, another piece that comes up for developer velocity is also writing up better issues. I think we've gotten slightly better at doing this, but we're still not great, right? Like the idea here is that even to us, people who work at, us as in people who work at VMware, sometimes a lot of these issues aren't really accessible to us, like even we don't know necessarily what they mean or why they're there, much less someone who's in the community. And so writing out these issues in a much more detailed manner and actually explaining the context for why and how, at least on a very basic level, is something that overall can help us a lot, right? Because then the person who's pulling down the issue would kind of be more clear on what's needing to be built, but also that's the part of building a healthy open source community where everybody can contribute. And I'm not going to click into specific issues examples, but certainly we can. There's more than a dozen of them where we can do better at. So those are my two thoughts on this matter. Pretty sure we can certainly talk about their more process things, but does anyone have thoughts?
I have a question. Well, I don't use the flags on my PRs, so I was wondering if you guys do. Like sometimes I just put that like a draft, but I don't use like a flag to say that it's ready for review. So yeah, I just want to make sure that if I'm gonna review something, it's really ready for review and not just somebody just making sure that the PR is just probably running tests or making sure they don't want to run the test on their machines and they're just using actions to run the test for them or something like that. I just want to make sure. I would like to have a consensus about it. It's like if we had the PR there, it's ready for review, isn't it?
Unless it's marked as draft or maybe has failing tests and things like that. I think once you put the PR out there, it's assumed that it's ready for review.
Okay.
But at least that's my assumption. I might be wrong.
Yes, that will be nice to have a consensus about it. Like we all can.
Yeah. So I've contributed to several open source projects, and my understanding is that when you open a pull request, it's ready, barring a failing test, right? And typically those scenarios are like the tests work locally, but it's generally bad form to push something to CI just to see if the tests run, right? Like you want to run your tests locally. But generally speaking, right, like if you push your code out there, you're saying it's ready. And GitHub, and this was even before GitHub had the draft feature, right? So like before people would do stuff like do not merge or like, weird stuff in the titles, but like we now have the right buttons to not do that. So I think like the question I would ask back is like, when do you push something that's not a draft and it's not ready for review, right? And I really don't see, right? Like if we ask the question of the negative, like I don't really see scenarios where you'd want to push your code and not have it reviewed because otherwise you just push it to a fork and you just let someone see your branch, right? You don't have to hit the pull request button to share code.
Okay, sometimes I just use labels, but I don't have too much experience in open source, so that was the question.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Yeah, so I think, well, I mean, it's like a consensus of like the folks on this call, I think, or at the very least, but I think here's the thing. It's the processes are subject to change. I think generally speaking, if it's really more of like if you're reviewing something, just feel free to call it out or just say like, hey, I'm going to go take a look at this bit of code. I think reading other people's code is equally as important as writing code. And so one, it's the best way to learn about other parts of the code base, but also just becoming a better engineer in general. So definitely like read other people's code and just take them as learning opportunities. I think it's probably the best part about doing code reviews. It's that you can see how someone else might solve a particular problem that might not be your particular solution, but would still be equally valid.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I kind of feel that maybe we need to always kind of internally prioritize doing that compared to, I mean, we all want to write the code, right? And that's like the best part of our job. But in the same time, as Sam said, understanding other parts of the code and how everything fit together, even if you're not active in a certain area of project, it's really important. So I think maybe we need to prioritize that. And a couple other notes. I think I like what you said about Sam about the ownership and owning the parts. That might help us too. Another thing I was considering is it might be also a good idea that when we submit a PR, if we explicitly state in a PR who we want that to be reviewed by, so that shows up in everybody's workflow. Maybe that will help as well. Just ideas. I'm not leaning towards any one of those, but I just want to throw them out. Some things we can do.
Yeah, and I have another maybe naive question, but if I approve the PR, the person that created the PR is going to merge it, isn't it? Just want to make sure of that.
That is correct.
One thing, sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
One thing I think about doing when I'm making PR is, to just like push like a demo code that people can just like switch to, for example, like if I have a PR branch, I could like make an additional commit on that branch and call it something else and push it so people could, just bring it down and just have like a demo to play with based on whatever PR is about. Because there are times like when I review a PR, but I just like I don't go ahead and like implement the changes that are not part of the main code base. Or that is, for example, like there's a new component, but it's not used by any other like existing component like it's printed. So like it'd be useful to have some kind of a demo code that I can look at and play with just to check the correctness myself. I was thinking about doing it for my own PRs, but it could generally be useful. It totally depends on the PR author. It's not something that should be forced. I find like if I provided with my PRs, for example, with alerts, I could just like have a separate branch where all the components that contain alerts, and I show them via plugin or something, and people can just play with it instead of implementing their own alerts to check the correctness.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. And that's something we do. I think for your particular case with the alerts, I would say something amongst the lines of that's what the storybook is for. for a lot of our component related work, you don't need to have an Octant and a plugin system set up to view how those components work. And generally, I know we've been doing a lot of component related work lately. So that's generally what we want to encourage alongside those PRs that update new components or create a new component pattern, is to have some of that documentation. So then they end up on reference.octant.dev, simply because, one, we want to think about it in terms of whether or not this component makes sense from a UI perspective, but then also like eventually we also want to jump back from like the programmatic approach, right? Like you implicitly add a code snippet into the storybook, so then someone can say, okay, I want to use this pattern. Can I just copy and paste something really quick to try it out?
This is something, I guess, that I get used to.
Yeah, and to extend that, I think even if you're not creating component, like if you look at the very bottom of the storybook, there's a bunch of stories that are not component related. There's some resource view run. There's like one talking about the, I forgot how we called it, that bottom panel, right? So, so if you feel there's a need to illustrate how something is working, this is a good place to add it. And for example, I added all the resource stories down there so I can use them for testing to make sure, the layout is good for different scenarios. That's not a good example, but, things like this. So, this is a good place to add, even if you let's say you want to show how components work together, you can create a simple story and just add it here. At some point we are planning to add tests around all those stories, so if nothing else, hopefully one day we'll have a snapshots for those stories and make sure that they're used that way as well. So but for the components, this is pretty much required to be here, like, code examples and illustrating different usages, illustrating how parameters are used for each component, things like that. So.
Cool. Yeah. And so it's generally like, and I think like this is for components in general, right? If we're talking about something a bit more abstract, certainly that would just involve running Octant, right? And really that's what we also want to encourage, right? Like probably for us in particular, we want to be dog fooding our own work. We need to be running Octant ourselves, and we're doing things on Kubernetes. And the general key indicator is that if we don't want to use it, or if we're not using it, then we probably haven't done a great job of whatever it is that we're implementing. Right? Like the biggest one here is like the Electron build, right? Like currently right now, like even with demos and stuff, like a lot of times I catch myself still running the binary because it's convenient, even though the Electron build is what we are going to ship in the future, and we have already decided that. So I should only be showing the Electron build, but I don't, because there isn't really much in the Electron build at the moment that the web binary doesn't offer. And so what we want to do is to move to those places and continually dog food and be able to show what value is being added by our decisions. Cool. All right. Well, I think we've got some really good stuff, and this is an awesome conversation. I think when we can, I think some of the actions that we want to come back to, I think this is an interesting one, adding owners. I think we've talked about this in the past historically, and this might revolve some longer term discussion around whether or not this is something we want to implement now or later. I think currently right now the team is still a little too small to have owners, but we can certainly start adding this concept where people get tagged as owners. So then, like, say, someone gets the final review, right? So like someone who might be a subject matter expert in one particular area of the code base, they someone else can review, but we would also have like a final pass, someone who can sign it off. And I think this workflow has been done with upstream Kubernetes a lot, so we can model our process after that. Cool. Anything else about improving workflow and how we can get more developer velocity in open source in general? I think that's probably the coolest part here, right? Is that our developer velocity is dependent on an external variable.
Right. No, I think this is a great discussion. Thank you. And I'm not expecting we're going to get all the answers right here and right now, but as long as we iterate on this and try to find the best ways and consciously think about it, as we do our day-to-day work, I think we're going to end up, improving and getting good benefits out of it.
Cool. All right. And yes, without further ado, let's jump to the last item of the agenda. So this one is, very briefly, addition of standard alerts. It's something that Vikram has been working on, and I wanted to highlight it because it's pretty cool. It's this notion that you have standard. So Clarity, they created a new style of alerts in Clarity Core. And whoa, my computer is really lagging today. Probably have way too many Chrome tabs open. So one of the cool things about the new Clarity Core components is that they have an alert, and they have this concept of a standard alert, and they also have app level alerts. And so they have this global alert, and they've got a pattern where you can add some action item into the alert. And you also have these standard alerts, which are softer. They're in this pastel color, and they can belong inside certain components, like I think like a placement. You can like throw this inside a modal. I think Octant already has scenarios where they throw this inside of a card in a summary. And so this is a pretty cool pattern that we want to start introducing, because we totally see a lot of people using this, and even internally, where we can show warnings and errors in a much more a much more cleaner way. Interestingly enough, they also have this idea of a lightweight alert, which is effectively an icon component and a text component, at least in Octant land, of what this is supposed to be. And so I think we might not implement this. I don't think we will, to be honest. But this is just kind of a cool thing to do, or we might even implement this anyways. I think having multiple ways to achieve the same thing is not unfeasible. We probably have to come up with a good reason why. But yeah, this is going to hopefully land soon. I think it's just missing one or two things before it's good to go. Any questions, comments about alerts? This one's gonna be fun. Something I'm really excited about is being able to have these actionable alerts inside of a particular component. It'll give us a really, I guess, like a better way to expose user actions as opposed to just plain old buttons. So anyway, that's standard alerts.
Yeah, +1 on that. It's really cool. I can't wait to see that in Octant. Just to improves the interactivity, gives you feedback right there where it should be. And I really like how they did it too. They decided to preserve up-level alerts and add those. So I think it's really good to have two-level kind of two-tongued approach to that, if you will. So yeah, it should be cool to see it in Octant.
Cool. All right. Well, if there are no more questions about standards alerts, we can go to open Q&A. I don't think anyone has added anything to the agenda, but anyone, any general questions? Nope. Okay. Well, if there's nothing else, I think we can call it a day. Cool. Well, thank you everyone for coming to this community meeting, and we'll see you all next week.
Thank you all. Take care.